Hey guys, good afternoon. I apologize for this video coming a bit late. It's just that my throat is just now cleared up. Okay, I'm going to go over the methods of psychology today. This is going to be part one of the video. It's probably going to be in about 3 parts. First of all, we have the purpose of psychological research. We know that research has to be as exact as possible, but it's never perfect. We have theories and hypotheses. We know that the theory of evolution is currently a theory, not fact. It is still proven. It's not proven yet. But a theory is a scientific theory. It's a logical explanation of all the relevant data or facts scientists have observed regarding certain natural phenomena. A theory must be testable and refutable. A hypothesis, on the other hand, is a statement that proposes an existence, typically as a tentative explanation for cause and effect, often designed for research testing. In other words, it has to be a testable, refutable statement. It's an if-then statement. If I jump up and down for 5 minutes, my heart rate's going to get higher for every minute I jump up and down. That's going to be a hypothesis. Now, there's a whole bunch of different hypotheses supporting the theory of evolution. We have basic research and applied research. We talked about that a little bit in Chapter 1. Basic research is research that tests theories and hypotheses. It's done for the love of science. Applied research is research used to solve a problem. This is a lot done in the clinical, counseling, engineering, business, and workplace applications. You can use it to determine what works best in a company, and use it to determine what works best in helping people adjust to life and whatever clinical problems they might be undergoing. Now, applied research often borrows from basic research, such as theories of developmental and cognitive. Now, in order for anything to work, the study has to be able to be replicated, oftentimes in a different area. This is research conducted for the purpose of verifying previous findings. It's the backbone of good science. However, the results of a study can vary considerably depending on the experimental conditions and the research method used. And this topic of a case study. There's several different types of psychological research. Several types of psychological research. Case study is the main one. Well, the first one. And the case study involves a whole bunch of different ways gathering information, but you typically use a small amount of participants, okay? Like 4 or 5 participants, but mostly case studies are done on 1 participant at a time. It involves an in-depth study of 1 participant to examine an individual using direct observation, testing, experimentation, and other methods. These are typically done on people that's very hard to find in the general population, such as people with really high IQs, or someone that they talk about in relation to using a certain type of therapy on. If you ever want to read a good book on case studies, there's Yalom's book called Love's Executioner. That's a really good book. I'd recommend it. The problem with case studies, there's a lack of investigative control. There's nothing to compare your data to. If I do a study on the effects of intelligence and schizophrenia, I can't really compare that to a normal person with schizophrenia because it doesn't work that way. So there's potential for subjective bias. I, as a researcher, can form an attachment with the people I'm studying and therefore kind of skew my research a little bit. It's a focus on small samples or individual cases, but it's difficult to generalize to other people. So it's hard to say, well, let's say I take a whole bunch of people with schizophrenia or people who are victims of childhood sexual abuse in a certain university and do a study on them. It's a case study. I spend a lot of time with them, interviewing them, having them do studies, what have you. It's very difficult to generalize those findings to everyone else with those issues, because it's just people in one area. A survey, however, is a very interesting method of standardizing information, or getting a lot of information from a lot of people in a relatively small amount of time. This is a research method that provides a descriptive information in which a representative sample of people are questioned about their behaviors or their attitudes. There's two types of samples, representative and random. Now let's say your target demographic is Acadiana, which is the majority of the south of Louisiana. So let's say you do that. It's a larger population. We want to try to figure out how the demographics would work best to be representative of that population. For instance, you don't want to just measure people who make above $50,000 a year, since there are a lot of people who make below that. So you want to look at people in the general population, probably use census data or whatever, try to determine how this works in the general population. If people, you want to make sure you get a fair sampling of people of upper income and higher income, lower income data. You want to make sure you also represent for gender, being representative of the population. Let's say there's typically more males than females. You want to make sure you look at that too. You want to make sure your study sample has more males than females. So a representative sample is a sample in which critical subgroups are represented according to their incidence in the larger population. Let's say you have more boys and girls in Acadiana, and you do a sample of Acadiana citizens, but you want to make sure there's more men than women measured in the sample. Random sample is a sample of a larger population that's selected by randomization procedures. I took part in a survey gathering information when I was about 17, 18 years old. And one of the things we did to randomize our information is we randomly generated phone numbers from a phone book. Basically, we randomly generated them and called those numbers. So there's no biases. You want to make sure you don't interview your friends or just people you know. So you want to make sure it's fairly representative of a demographic bias. And there's also gender bias. You want to make sure the questions are aimed to both males and females. Also, you want to make sure you design the questions in a way that people can not only understand them, but that's relevant to the people you're actually studying. For instance, you don't want to interview a Republican group on how they feel about the pro-choice movement. Typically, that's not going to bode very well, and your data will be definitely skewed. So you want to make sure it's appropriate across research prospects. Then we have the observational method. This is a method of psychological research providing descriptive information, such as which participants are observed as they go about their unusual activities. A type of that is natural observation. It's psychological research using the observational method that takes place in a natural setting, such as the participant's home or school environment. So let's say when I get evaluated by my teacher, by my department head, that's going to be an example of naturalistic observation. Well, it's more of a professional observation. Naturalistic observation would actually be when I'm in the house. If I'm observing like a family I'm counseling, that will be considered naturalistic observation. Now there's two things that can go wrong if you're using the observational method of research. One is observer bias. Okay, if I'm the observer, if I have any preconceived notion of who I'm observing, let's say I'm observing a kindergarten class, and I know, like I've been told by other teachers and stuff like that, that this kindergarten class is trouble. Do you think I would honestly report them as being nice kids when I see them? Probably not. See, my preconceived notion of those kids might affect how I perceive them when I go in. Then the observer effect. This is a tendency of participants to modify behavior because they are aware they are being observed. If you are doing the observational method of research, your job is to make yourself as invisible as possible. Here's why. People tend to act differently when they are being absorbed. It's just the way I see it. When I used to work with people in homes, I spent a lot of my time sitting and observing before implementing a treatment plan. One of the main things I noticed that the kids would act a certain way at first when I was there. Okay guys, this is the end of part 1. I have to stop because I don't think Instagram will let me load more than this. I'm just going to spend some time talking about the correlational method in the next video. Thank you very much.